Well, more now on the U.S.-sponsored Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal, which is now in effect. Michael Link is the former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory. Michael, we always appreciate your insight, so thanks for your time this morning. And if we can just start with your reaction to the details in this deal.
Well, look, on the positive side, this is an important accomplishment. We're going to be seeing the release of the remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza, the release of a large number of Palestinian detainees who've been kept by Israel. We're going to be having a move back by Israeli troops to further positions away from the central cities and locations in the Gaza Strip. And very importantly, we're going to see a flood of humanitarian aid going into Gaza. And remember that the UN had declared parts of Gaza to be either famine zones or zones of extreme starvation. But I have to put out this kind of caution for your audience. This is a ceasefire we could have had months and months and months ago. As Donald Trump was entering office in January, he negotiated a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas that began on the 19th of January that had a number of phases to it, including the release of all remaining hostages, the release of Palestinian detainees, and an end to the war. Israel unilaterally broke that in mid-March, and the United States did nothing to try to prevent Israel from continuing this war for another 6.5 months. So in terms of the short run, I'm optimistic that we'll get these main features of the new ceasefire agreement accomplished. In the medium and long run, I'm much more pessimistic about where we're going with this.
And Michael, I have to ask you about your thoughts on what this seems to be a pretty stark disconnect between what Netanyahu said as early as a few weeks ago, that a Palestinian state will never happen, to this plan which does appear to pave the way for self-governance.
Well, this plan, I'm afraid to say, is full of ambiguity and escape clauses. We know from long experience with Middle East peace proposals that unless the plan is grounded in international law and a lot of detail and clarity, it's unlikely to succeed. And I think this plan is likely to go the way of all these previous plans. We have a very vague commitment in the Trump plan of a pathway to Palestinian self-determination and a Palestinian state. No timelines are attached to that, no detail or strategy of how we wind up getting there. Keep in mind that there are over 750,000 Israeli settlers in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. That is the single biggest obstacle to achieving what the international community says it wants, which is a genuine Palestinian state side by side Israel. There is nothing in this agreement which talks about these illegal Israeli settlements. So I don't think we're going to see a Palestinian state with this particular peace plan. And once these immediate goals of hostages and detainees and some aid going into Gaza are achieved, I'm afraid we're probably going to see the U.S. take their foot off the pedal.
That is critical, though, in the short term for the hundreds of thousands in Gaza. Let's just quickly touch on that. We are seeing some aid get through this week. Give us a sense of what we do need to see on the ground in the short term, just to deal with the humanitarian crisis.
Sure. When we had the ceasefire in January, February, and March, we had around 600 to 700 trucks a day bringing humanitarian aid, food, fuel, medical supplies, water into Gaza. After that, for 11 weeks, there was no humanitarian aid getting in whatsoever. Israel had blocked that. Once aid began to resume in June, we were getting around 70 to 130 trucks a day. What we need is now humanitarian aid up to scale. And there was a press conference yesterday with Tom Fletcher, who was the head of the UN Office of Humanitarian Aid. And he said that they had plans with respect to bringing in food, nutrition, healthcare and medical supplies, water and sanitation, and tents and shelter, because we're on the verge of a Mediterranean winter. So all of this, I think, is being scaled up rapidly. There have been thousands of trucks waiting outside of Gaza, wanting to get in with humanitarian aid, and this has been blocked. But if we can now scale up to 400 trucks now, and hopefully within 600 trucks within several weeks, then we will have averted the worst of the effects of this famine and extreme starvation.
Yeah, the world will be watching very closely over the next few days. Again, always appreciate your insight, Michael. That is Michael Link, former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory.